Welcome to another 2-Minute Tuesday, and last week we talked about Russell's 10-year and also kind of compared it to a number of other 10-year products. Well, today we're going to go away from the shelf hero side and go into the allocated side. And as you can probably guess by this lineup over here, we're talking Old Forester. Hello everyone, this is Bentley, and 2-Minute Tuesday for today is going to be this most recent release of the Old Forester 1924. Maybe we want to call this batch 2. I think it's technically the 2024 release, but it did not come into Washington until 2025 because we always get things way late. Way late. But how does this compare to some of the other 10 years that are out there? And is the profile similar to the previous release of 2023, or is it different? We're going to talk about that and compare it. But before we get into that, we should really talk about some basic understanding. Despite the fact that this says Old Forester on the label, this is not an Old Forester mash bill. Tricky. So if you're expecting a lot of the usual Old Forester profile, many of us get banana out of it or kind of a banana nut bread thing, you're not getting that. So I think a lot of people have gotten disappointed with 1924 in the past because they come with some preconceived notions about what it should taste like compared to what it actually does taste like. The actual mash bill is the same one as early times. That's right, Brown-Forman found a way to use their old mash bill, but more importantly, the one that we really know this mash bill from is King of Kentucky. That's right, Early Times and King of Kentucky are the exact same mash bill. Now, significantly different aging processes and all that kind of stuff, right? When I talk to my friends about Old Forester 1924, I have given it the nickname Prince of Kentucky. It's not quite the king, but it's something interesting. So, let's crack this bad boy open and get into 2-Minute Tuesday. Nice. Let's get in. Got a nice dark color, which you would kind of expect for a 10-year bourbon. Things are looking okay. Not the best, but it is only 100. On the nose, there's actually a little bit of ethanol, which is kind of surprising. It's got a much darker profile. There's what I would consider like a prune note. Maybe like some raisin, but more prune. And we saw that on the previous one. But there's a lot more sugar than I remember the previous version having. Very kind of dark brown sugar, maybe even like Demerara type sugar going on. And definitely some oak presence. Let's get on the palate. Ooh. Okay, that changed quick. So there's a nice upfront sweetness, definitely that kind of brown sugar, wood sugar type sweetness that I typically enjoy when you start getting a little bit older bourbon. And then there's definitely like a prune or kind of raisiny note. And I think that's okay. Like, I like that because it's different. As it travels kind of toward the mid palate and into the finish, it does get a touch tannic and bitter. And you probably saw that in the reaction to my face, first kind of experiencing my first sip on this. Let's go back in, get a little bit more. There is more ethanol on the nose than there is on the palate. Man, that brown sugar and kind of prune or raisiny thing that's going on, it's a little more pruny to me than raisin, but it has some slight bitter notes to it, which I've had in some other whiskeys before that are finished. So that's kind of interesting that it's present here in this unfinished 10-year bourbon. I will say, like, it has a really good linger. There's a nice kind of barrel spice influence. You feel that kind of warm Kentucky hug. It sits like right here for like right in the throat, basically. And on the very back of the tongue for quite a while, given that it's only 100 proof. So that's kind of nice that, like, despite the fact that the viscosity didn't look all that good and it doesn't like really crazily coat the palate, the finish lingers a bit better than I would anticipate for that kind of viscosity. It is still a little bitter, not in a like really disgusting way, but more of a vaguely tannic way. It's not enough to where it becomes a negative on my palate, but it's definitely not something. I usually don't like bitter notes in a lot of my whiskey. Occasionally I do though, and this is one of the ones where I'm okay with it. Let's get an overall score. I think this one's pretty fast. I'm going to give this 68. Not super high. I actually do like this whiskey, but usually when I like this is because I want something that isn't the usual like brighter fruit forward whiskeys that I tend to enjoy, or something that's like very like caramel heavy, right? So your more classic bourbon notes, those are the things that tend to be up my alley. And usually when I go to an Old Forester product, I want that big like in your face kind of banana or banana nut bread flavor. Like the Old Forester 100 Black Label, the single barrels, that's my favorite Old Forester product. And a lot of people might be like, no, I want the Blue Label barrel proof, or it's 1920 or it's 1910. For me, the proof doesn't matter. It's the flavor profile. And almost all the black labels that I've had give me this amazing kind of like caramel drizzled banana bread thing, and I love it. Absolutely love it. Considering that this says Old Forester on the label, but in mash bill and flavor profile, it is absolutely not an Old Forester product. I think if you take that assumption of what Old Forester should taste like out of your head, you just completely get rid of it and go into it as just this is a different brown form in whiskey, I think you can appreciate this a bit more. And in blinds, I've seen this stand up to a number of heavier hitting whiskeys surprisingly well. Does it win? Not always. But does it win at like that 100 proof level? Yeah, I've seen a lot of people pick this in the blind over a lot of other 100 proof or lower proof 10-year whiskeys. However, in my personal palate, there's other whiskey I'd rather have. This is okay, but considering this is $115 plus taxes at MSRP, and in some places it goes for more, I think mine was, like, after all the taxes and stuff, was close to about $140. Just, that's Washington. Unfortunate, I know, but I can't go super high on this. I still think that my appraisal in the previous week that Russell's is actually better than this is accurate, and it's definitely got a, like, big sugar up front, wood, and a little bit of that bitter note in the back, right? So there's this nice kind of sweetness and that kind of, again, prune raisin thing. And then it evolves into those sweetnesses going away. There's still a little bit of that lingering kind of prune type flavor, but that's where the oak influence and some of the barrel char starts kicking in as you get toward the end of your taste, right? And I kind of like the fact that it evolves. It's not one note all the way through, even though it's several notes. It's not just that whole taste all the way through. It kind of evolves and changes throughout the pour. And I think that can help it perform a little bit better in, say, blinds, as an example, because it takes you on a little bit of a ride rather than just like a coast, so to speak. What I want to do now is really quickly, I have a pour of the previous year, and let's just do a quick comparison to see how different they are on that quick, like, one sip, kind of 1 cent, right? Yes, this is nowhere near as sweet on the nose. Now, granted, it's been open for quite a while, comparatively, but that big, like, brown sugar note is just not present. And the ethanol is a little more mellow, but we could probably equate that to this being a fresh crack compared to this having been open for a while. I bet as this sits open, that ethanol that sits on the nose will tame down a little bit, and it will be closer to what I'm getting here, just a little bit more sweetness on it. Quick taste, and we'll compare that real fast. Ooh, so that like prune raisin thing is way stronger here because it doesn't have that upfront like brown sugar sweetness to kind of tame that down. And there's actually more of the, like, I would say bitter fruit note as opposed to a bitter oak note. I think in the most recent release, there's a little bit more bitter oak toward the finish, where this, about mid-palate, has a kind of bittery fruit note that I would ascribe more to like something in the way that prunes taste compared to, say, the opposing one tastes. I know I said 1 sip, but the oak presence is less strong in this one. It kind of stays more that like universal set of notes throughout the pour. It doesn't go on quite the ride that the newer one does. So I was going to say, if you were looking for a 1924, try to find a more recent one. It's a little sweeter. I would actually probably put this just like about a point below. I think the little extra sweetness for my palate is more interesting. Evolution of it, where it goes from sweet into that with kind of oak influence, bitter, lightly bitter note, is more interesting a ride over here. But they're not so different that it's like one is a 68 and the other is like a 60. I would say it's more like one's a 67 and one's a 68. They're both decent whiskey, do not get me wrong, but I think at their price point, there's just a lot of other better whiskey you can get, especially in that lower proof range. A similar thing I would pick up in this price range, or at least what I can typically find in this price range. It's not a 10-year product, but H. Taylor Single Barrel. This is way more up my profile and pretty similar in price in the Washington State area, at least for me. Even though I know that's not its MSRP, that's usually what they go for. I would probably rather have that than the Old Forester. But there are a lot of people who are going to like that darker fruit note and that upfront sweetness, and they won't find anything wrong with the little bitter note. I know a lot of people who like heavy influence from their oak to get that more tannic presence, and in that case, you're going to like the 1924 quite a lot. How's our Prince of Kentucky holding up? Doing decent, but it's certainly not crushing some of the other bottles that we've seen thus far and reviewed thus far. It's still a decent whiskey. I think the thing that really holds it back is its price. If it was more aligned in price to something like the 1924, this would probably get closer to a home run. And that's one thing I keep in mind. Like, I can't do it purely on flavor. You have to account for price, because Old Forester makes a lot of really good products. And I think a lot of people were expecting this to be completely lights out with how long we waited for a more age-stated Old Forester product, and then to find out it's a completely different mash bill. I think that threw a lot of people for a loop. But when I tasted the original one and now the new batch, I take that out of my head. I don't associate the fact that it is Old Forester on the label means it's Old Forester in the profile and mash bill. And that helps me appreciate it as a decent whiskey, and I like having it on my shelf, but it's not something that I'm going to go chase backups for. I was willing to try it this year just because I'd heard there were some differences in some of the people that early reviewed it, and there definitely is a lot more sweetness to it. But I still think I would rather have like a Russell's 10-year, and I can get like 3 of those for the price of one 1924. or I can get 2 Old Forester 1920s, and in many cases 2 Old Forester Black Label picks, and I would totally take those 2 Black Label picks over this 1924 here. There you go. If you've enjoyed this 2-Minute Tuesday, let me know. The comments down below. Have you had Old Forester 1924? Do you love it? Do you think I'm completely off base? How dare I insult Prince of Kentucky? It is a way better whiskey, and I would never ever drink Russell's instead. Let me know in the comments down below. I want to hear from you guys. I want to hear your experiences. If you've had some of this whiskey and you either concur with me in that, man, the price is kind of killing it. If it was cheaper, this would be way better. Or you're like, dude, you're really under evaluating this whiskey. It's way more interesting, and here's why. I want to hear from you in the comments down below. If you're not subscribed, consider subscribing, and here's why. The first time I'm going to talk about this. When we hit 1,000 subscribers, we're going to do a giveaway, and one of the first things we're giving away is this exact same thing I just showed you earlier, an E.H. Taylor single barrel. This is really good whiskey, and for some people, very, very hard to find. I've been pretty fortunate in that I've found a few in the last year and a half or so, and so when we hit 1,000 subscribers, we're going to give one of these bad boys away. And we might give away a few more things too. So stay tuned, subscribe, hit the little notification bell so you don't miss a single 2-Minute Tuesday where you can either concur or argue with my profile notes for whiskey. As always, my friends, thank you so much for watching, and stay awesome.